My brother got a $66,000 bonus. I got $3,200. My dad's CEO begged me to come back the next day. The main dashboard was bleeding red. Cooling fans screamed like jet engines taking off in the tight confines of the server room. We were losing $45,000 every single minute. My younger brother, the so-called VP of Innovation, was gripping his hair, hyperventilating as the error logs blurred across the screen. "David, help me. Dad will kill us," he yelled. I looked at him, then thought about the $3,200 bonus check compared to his $66,000. I simply reached down, unplugged my headset, and placed my security badge on the desk. "He's going to kill you," I said. "I don't work here anymore. Thank you for being here. Please comment why. So I know you're ready and listen to me tell the whole story." I didn't flip the table. I didn't scream. I didn't launch a chair through the glass wall of the server room. People always think that the breaking point in a man's life is loud and violent. But it isn't. My breaking point was the quietest moment of my entire life. It was exactly 2:14 a.m. on the Friday after Thanksgiving. Black Friday, the most critical 48 hours of the year for Velocity Logistics. The room was freezing, kept at a constant 62 degrees to stop the hardware from melting down. But the air felt thick, heavy with the smell of ozone and burning plastic. The main dashboard on the wall, usually a soothing sea of green indicators, was flashing a blinding, angry crimson. The cooling fans inside the server racks were screaming. They literally sounded like a commercial jet spooling up on a runway. Just 3 feet away from me, my younger brother Julian was falling apart. Julian was 29 years old. He was wearing a custom-tailored Italian suit that probably cost more than my first car, even at 2 in the morning. His perfectly styled hair was a mess because he kept dragging his shaking hands through it. He was staring at the main monitor where the error logs were scrolling so fast they looked like a blur of white static. He was hyperventilating. Actually hyperventilating. His chest heaved up and down, and sweat was literally dripping off the tip of his nose onto his pristine, backlit mechanical keyboard. David, man, I can't get it," Julian yelled, his voice cracking like a terrified teenager. "It's not accepting the override. The system is locking me out." I just sat there in my worn-out flannel shirt and jeans. I watched him panic. I watched the numbers on the secondary screen tick upward. We were a logistics company handling the East Coast shipping routes for 3 of the biggest retail giants in the country. That little ticker on the screen was estimating our real-time financial hemorrhage. We were losing about $45,000 every single minute. Trucks were completely frozen at the loading gates in New Jersey. Automated sorting bots down in our Atlanta hub had just stopped dead in their tracks, dropping packages right on the conveyor belts. The live tracking system for 3 million packages had just vanished into thin air. The entire network had gone dark. "What is error 4049? David?" Julian pleaded, spinning his leather chair to face me. His eyes were wide, terrified white discs. "Why isn't the backup spinning up? You built this thing. Do something." I looked at Julian. I looked at the gold Rolex on his wrist. Then I looked down at the desk. Sitting right next to my keyboard was a printed email. It was crumpled at the edges because I had been gripping it in my fist for the last 12 hours. It was an internal memo regarding the new Strategic Retention Initiative, a fancy corporate term for bonuses. I looked at the piece of paper, and then I looked back at my brother. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel sadness. I felt absolutely nothing. A cold, empty void had swallowed 12 years of loyalty, 12 years of missed holidays, and 12 years of trying to earn my father's respect. I reached up and pulled the heavy noise-canceling headset off my ears. The roar of the servers got instantly louder. I set the headset down on the desk. I unclipped my employee security badge from my belt. It was frayed at the edges. I had worn that exact badge lanyard since I was 23 years old. I placed it gently on top of the printed email. Julian stopped typing. He stared at my hands. "David? What are you doing? Why are you packing your bag? Are you getting the emergency drive from the vault?" I zipped up my canvas backpack and slung it over my shoulder. I stood up. My joints popped. I felt incredibly tired, but my mind was crystal clear. "Shift's over, Julian," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. It was dangerously calm, completely flat. "You can't leave," Julian screamed, jumping up from his chair. He grabbed my arm, but I shook him off immediately. "We are in a code black. The whole network is down. Dad will kill us." I looked him dead in the eyes. I saw the absolute terror of a man who finally realized his title and his suit couldn't save him. "Correction," I said, keeping my voice low. "Dad will kill you. I don't work here anymore. Good luck with the innovation." I turned my back on him. I pushed through the heavy double doors of the server room. I walked past the biometric scanners. I walked down the long, empty, fluorescent-lit hallway. I could hear Julian screaming my name from behind the thick glass, but the sound was muffled. I pushed through the front lobby doors and stepped out into the freezing November night air. The parking lot was empty except for my 10-year-old truck and Julian's brand-new Porsche 911 parked illegally in the fire lane. Before I even reached my truck door, my cell phone started vibrating in my pocket. The screen lit up with my father's name. Robert. Not Dad. Robert. The CO. I didn't block the number. I didn't reject the call. I just flipped the silent switch, tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, climbed in, and started the engine. I put the truck in gear and drove out of the corporate campus. This decision wasn't impulsive. I hadn't snapped. This was the clean break of a steel cable that had been fraying, strand by strand, for over a decade. But to understand why I walked away while my own father's empire burned to the ground, you need to understand what happened 12 hours earlier. For 12 straight years, I was the ghost in the machine at Velocity Logistics. I was the guy who kept the lights on. When I started working for my father, the company was nothing. It was a regional trucking outfit with a dozen trucks and a warehouse that smelled like diesel and cheap coffee. I was 23, fresh out of state college with a degree in computer science. My father, Robert, sat me down at the kitchen table and gave me the speech. He looked me in the eye and said, "David, we're building a legacy here. A family legacy. You put in the sweat equity now, you build the digital infrastructure we need to compete with the big boys, and I promise you when this company takes off, you will be right there at the top with me. This is your future." I believed him. I was young, naive, and desperate for the approval of a man who had always been too busy building a business to come to my little league games. So I built it. I built the entire routing algorithm from scratch. I built the database architecture. When the company expanded to a second warehouse, I wired the server racks myself because my father said we couldn't afford contractors. I was the guy they called at 3 a.m. on Christmas Eve because a server went down in Ohio. I was the guy who spent 3 days of his honeymoon sitting in a hotel bathroom in Hawaii with a laptop, fixing a critical API integration failure so we wouldn't lose our biggest client. Last year, I single-handedly rewrote the automated sorting logic. That project alone saved the company $7 million in operational costs. But my title? Senior Systems Architect. My salary? Barely above industry average for an entry-level developer. Whenever I asked for a raise or a promotion, or just a budget to hire a decent assistant, my father would pull me into his massive corner office. He would pour a glass of expensive scotch, pat me on the back, and play the family card. "David, the market is tight right now," he would say, looking out his floor-to-ceiling windows. "We are reinvesting every penny into growth. You know, I appreciate you. You're the backbone of this place. But as family, we have to make sacrifices the regular employees don't. Your time will come. Think of the inheritance. Think of the long game." I swallowed that lie for a decade. I kept my head down. I kept the servers running. Then 8 months ago, Julian arrived. Julian is 6 years younger than me. While I was pulling all-nighters patching legacy code, Julian was at a private university, partying his way through an undergraduate degree, entirely funded by my parents. Then, he decided he wanted to go to business school, a prestigious, incredibly expensive MBA program. The day Julian graduated, my father hired him. He didn't start at the bottom. He didn't start in the middle. My father created a brand new executive position just for him, Vice President of Innovation. Julian walked into the building on his first day wearing an imported suit, smelling like expensive cologne, and holding a cup of artisan coffee. He was given a massive office next to our father's. He was given a corporate credit card, and he was given authority over the entire tech division, which meant, on paper, my little brother with zero technical skills was now my boss. Julian spent his days writing long, meaningless thought leadership articles on LinkedIn about AI-driven synergies and cloud-native paradigm shifts. He called mandatory all-hands meetings to discuss workflow optimization, but the kid couldn't write a single line of SQL code to save his life. If his monitor got unplugged, he had to call the help desk. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just corporate politics. But the disrespect became suffocating. 3 months ago, the legacy system I built started showing signs of catastrophic strain. The volume of data we were processing had outgrown the architecture. I went to my father with a detailed 50-page proposal to rebuild the core database before the holiday rush. My father barely looked at the first page. Julian was sitting in the corner of the office, playing with a golf putter. "It's too expensive, David," my father said, waving his hand dismissively. "And it takes too much downtime. Julian thinks we can just migrate some of the load to a third-party cloud service and patch the existing framework." I stared at him. "Dad, you can't just patch a crumbling foundation. If we hit Black Friday volumes on this current setup, it will buckle. It will crash hard." Julian stopped putting and chuckled. "Dave, you're being an alarmist. You tech guys always overcomplicate things to justify your budgets. Just keep it running. Leverage the existing assets. That's your job. Just keep it running," my father echoed. "No rebuilds. We don't have the capital to waste on back-end stuff right now." So I did my job. I built a highly complex manual override sequence. It was a band-aid on a bullet wound. It required specific load balancing commands typed in an exact syntax when the system volume hit 90% capacity. I documented it meticulously. I saved it in the emergency procedures folder on the shared network drive. I even printed a copy and put it on Julian's desk. But Julian didn't read technical documentation. Julian read books like The 4-Hour Workweek, which brings us to yesterday afternoon, Friday, 2 p.m., 10 hours before the crash. The stress in the building was palpable. The Black Friday volume was already spiking. Management had been terrified of losing key personnel during the rush, so my father had announced a strategic retention initiative. "We know the tech market is hot," my father had announced in the Monday briefing. "And we want our key players to know that loyalty goes both ways. We take care of our own." Loyalty. That word tasted like ash in my mouth. At 2 p.m., I walked down the hall to the break room to grab a cup of awful office coffee. The heavy-duty commercial printer in the hallway was jammed. It was beeping loudly. I sighed, set my mug down, and opened the paper tray to clear the jam. I pulled out the crumpled sheet of paper. I was about to throw it in the recycling bin when my eyes caught the company letterhead. Then I saw the title, Confidential 2026 Executive Retention Bonus Allocations. I froze. I looked at the top of the paper. It showed the user who had sent the print job, Elijah Miller, the Director of Human Resources. Elijah was an older guy, always quiet, always observing. He knew exactly what went on in this company. I read the first line. Name, Julian, last name. Title, VP of Innovation. Tenure, 8 months. Retention bonus, $66,000. My stomach dropped. $66,000. For 8 months of walking around the office spouting buzzwords. For making my life a living hell. I forced my eyes down the list. I scanned past the marketing directors and the regional managers. And then, at the very bottom of the page, under the technical support tier, I saw my name. Name, David, last name. Title, Senior Systems Architect. Tenure, 12 years. Appreciation stipend, $3,200. I didn't misread it. There were no missing zeros. $3,200. My brother, who couldn't restart a router, was worth $66,000 of retention. The man who built the entire company's infrastructure and kept it breathing, was worth less than a used Honda Civic. They didn't even call it a bonus for me. They called it a stipend. I stood in that hallway for 5 minutes. The printer kept beeping. People walked past me. I didn't hear them. In that moment, everything became perfectly clear. I wasn't a son. I wasn't a partner. I wasn't a key player. I was just cheap labor. I was the family mule. And my father was entirely content to work me to death while feeding my little brother out of a silver spoon. Elijah hadn't jammed the printer by accident. He left that paper there on purpose. He knew I walked past it every day at 2 p.m. It was a silent warning. A wake-up call from the only honest man in corporate leadership. I folded the paper carefully. I put it in my pocket. I went back to my desk. I didn't say a word. I just sat down and waited for the inevitable. I knew the system was going to hit capacity around 2 a.m. I knew Julian would panic. And for the first time in 12 years, I decided I wasn't going to save them. I drove home in total silence. I didn't turn on the radio. The heater in my old truck was broken, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt lighter than I had in a decade. I pulled into my driveway at 3 a.m. The neighborhood was dead quiet. I walked into the kitchen, didn't turn on the main lights, and poured myself a generous glass of cheap bourbon. I walked out to the back porch and sat in the cold. I took my phone out of my pocket and set it on the patio table. It was lighting up like a strobe light. 14 missed calls from Julian. 22 missed calls from Robert. Text message from Julian. Dave, please pick up. Servers are literally smoking. Text message from Robert. David, answer your phone now. This is not a game. We are losing $50,000 a minute. If you don't get back here and fix this, I am calling the company lawyer. You are legally liable. I took a slow sip of the bourbon. It burned on the way down. Legally liable. That was his play. Threaten the son with a lawyer. I knew my employment contract better than HR did. I was an at-will employee. I could walk out at any second, for any reason. I hadn't planted a virus. I hadn't deleted any files. I hadn't sabotaged a single piece of hardware. I just stopped preventing the inevitable. I stopped doing the job of 5 men for the price of half a man. At 4 a.m., the sliding glass door opened. My wife, Sarah, stepped out onto the porch. She was wrapping her thick bathrobe tightly around her waist, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Sarah is a saint. She is the woman who sat alone at dinner tables on our anniversaries while I was on the phone with server hosting companies. She is the woman who watched me age 10 years in the span of 5. She looked at the bottle of bourbon. She looked at my phone, which was vibrating violently against the glass table, flashing my father's name again. She walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. Did you finally get fired? She asked softly. I looked up at her. Better, I said. I quit. She didn't gasp. She didn't ask how we were going to pay the mortgage or how we were going to afford groceries. She just sat down in the chair next to me. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the folded, crumpled piece of paper from the printer, and handed it to her. Sarah unfolded it in the dim porch light. She read Julian's name. She read the $66,000. Then she read my name. She read the $3,200. I watched her jaw clench. Sarah had always tried to keep the peace. She always encouraged me to go to family Thanksgiving dinners, to bite my tongue when my father bragged about Julian's imaginary accomplishments. She believed in family. She read my father's frantic, threatening text messages on the phone screen. Sarah carefully set the paper down. She picked up my phone, powered it off completely, and tossed it onto the empty chair. She looked me dead in the eyes, her expression harder than I had ever seen it. Let it burn, she said. And then she stood up, kissed my forehead, and went back to bed. By Saturday morning, 8 hours after I walked out, the situation had escalated from an internal technical glitch to a national news story. I woke up at 10 a.m. I made a pot of coffee and turned on the television in the living room. It was on a major financial news network. The breaking news ticker at the bottom of the screen read, Major logistics network failure cripples East Coast retail deliveries ahead of Cyber Monday. The news anchor was talking about Velocity Logistics. They were showing footage of semi-trucks backed up for miles outside our New Jersey hub. The stock price of our 3 biggest retail clients had dipped in pre-market trading. Velocity itself was privately held, but the breach of contract penalties were going to be astronomical. I was drinking my coffee, watching the chaos unfold, when my personal cell phone rang. I had turned my work phone off, but this was my private number. Only a few people had it. I looked at the caller ID. It was my mother, Martha. I hesitated. My mother was the ultimate peacemaker. She was the master of sweeping things under the rug. I braced myself for the guilt trip and answered the call. David? Her voice was trembling, thick with tears. David, honey? Please tell me you're on your way to the office. I'm at home, Mom. I'm drinking coffee. David, you have to go back. She cried out. The panic in her voice was real. Your father is having chest pains. Julian is crying in his office. The board of directors is calling an emergency meeting. You are destroying your family over a silly tantrum. A tantrum? I gripped the coffee mug tightly. Mom, did Dad tell you why I left? Did he tell you about the retention bonuses? Yes, he told me. She snapped, her tone shifting from pleading to defensive. He told me you found a draft document and got your feelings hurt. David, be reasonable. Julian has an image to maintain. He's an executive. He has a luxury car payment. He has his country club dues to network for the business. You and Sarah live a simple life. You don't need that kind of money right now. Your father was going to make it up to you at Christmas. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. He gave the guy who breaks the system 20 times more money than the guy who builds it. That's not a family, Mom. That's a dictatorship. I'm done. You are so selfish. She screamed through the phone. It was shocking. My mother never raised her voice. We sacrificed everything for you. We gave you everything. Do you know what we had to do to get Julian that VP job? Do you know what his MBA cost us? I know it cost a fortune, I said coldly. And I know he didn't earn a single penny of it. You don't know anything. She sobbed angrily. And then, the words spilled out of her mouth. The words she could never take back. Where do you think we got the money for his tuition, David? We didn't have liquid cash. Your father had to empty the old college fund. The one we set up for you and never used. We used the money we promised for your house down payment to pay for your brother's degree so he could have a future. And this is how you repay us? By destroying his career. The silence in my kitchen was deafening. I stopped breathing. The air in my lungs turned to ice. When I was 18, I got accepted into a prestigious out-of-state engineering program. My parents sat me down and told me times were tough. They told me they couldn't afford it. They begged me to go to the cheap local state college and live at home to save money. They promised me, swore to me, that the money in my college fund would be saved, compounding interest, and they would give it to me when I was ready to buy my first house with Sarah. When Sarah and I bought our modest 3-bedroom house 5 years ago, I asked my dad for the money. He told me it was tied up in company stock. He told me he couldn't liquidate it without hurting the business. So, Sarah and I took out a massive mortgage at a terrible interest rate and ate ramen noodles for 2 years. They didn't tie it up in stock. They gave my money, the money I sacrificed my dream school for, to Julian so he could buy a useless degree, to steal my credit and get a $66,000 bonus. David, are you there? My mother demanded. I sipped my coffee. Tasted like bitter dirt. Tell Robert to hire a good lawyer, Mom, I said softly. Because I'm not coming back. I hung up the phone. I blocked her number. I blocked my father's number. I blocked Julian's number. The bridge wasn't just burned. I had rigged it with explosives and blown it to dust. By Sunday morning, 48 hours after I walked out of the server room, the corporate bleeding was catastrophic. I spent Saturday afternoon out in the backyard, chopping firewood. Physical labor was the only thing keeping my mind from spiraling into a dark place after my mother's phone call. Every swing of the axe was a strike against the lies I had been fed my entire adult life. When I came back inside, I went into my small home office, booted up my personal computer, and logged into LinkedIn. My profile was painfully outdated. It just said, Senior Systems Architect at Velocity Logistics. I clicked the edit button. I updated my skills. I listed the specific database architectures I had built, the routing algorithms I had optimized, and the multimillion-dollar savings I had generated. And then, I clicked the small button that said, Open to work. I went to take a shower. When I came back 20 minutes later, my inbox was completely flooded. Word travels incredibly fast in the tech and logistics industry. Everyone knew Velocity Logistics was in a total meltdown. Everyone knew they were losing millions by the hour. And the smart people in the industry, the recruiters, the headhunters, the rival CTOs, they all knew exactly who I was. They knew Julian was a figurehead. They knew I was the actual architect. And they could all do the basic math. If the entire Velocity system crashed to the ground the exact second David walked out the door, David wasn't the problem. David was the linchpin. I had direct messages from Amazon logistics recruiters. I had a message from a VP at FedEx. I had interview requests offering base salaries that were triple what my father was paying me, with signing bonuses that made Julian's $66,000 look like pocket change. I sat there staring at the screen. For 12 years, my father had convinced me that I was lucky to have a job. He convinced me that I was unpolished, that I lacked executive presence, and that without the family business, I would be nothing. It was the ultimate gaslighting. I wasn't trapped. I was the golden goose, and I had just broken out of the cage. I was reading an offer email when my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number with a New York area code. I assumed it was another headhunter, so I answered it. David, it's Carter. I sat up straight in my chair. Carter wasn't a recruiter. Carter was the managing partner of a massive private equity firm in Manhattan. He was the primary outside investor in Velocity Logistics. He owned 40% of the company. I had only met him twice, both times when I had to present technical reports to the board because Julian didn't know how to read the data. Mr. Carter, I said cautiously, if you're calling to tell me to go fix the servers, you're wasting your time. Carter let out a dry, raspy chuckle. I don't care about your family drama, David. I'm a numbers guy. And right now, the numbers say that Robert and your idiot brother have cost me about $3 million in personal equity over the weekend. They fired me, I lied smoothly. You should talk to the VP of Innovation. Cut the crap. David, Carter said, his voice turning cold and sharp. I know exactly what happened. Elijah in HR sent me a secure email this morning. I saw the bonus allocations. I know what Robert did. I stayed silent. I didn't know what play the investor was making. Let me tell you something your father hasn't told you. Carter continued, his voice dropping low. Robert has been in secret negotiations for the last 4 months. He's trying to sell the company to a massive conglomerate out of Texas. He's been trying to inflate the company's valuation before the sale. My mind raced. Selling the company? He always said this was a legacy. He said it was for the family. Robert only cares about Robert, Carter sneered. His plan was simple. He was going to use the automated systems you built to show a massive profit margin this quarter. Then, he was going to finalize the sale in January. He structured the buyout deal so that the executive board, meaning him and Julian, would get massive golden parachutes and stock payouts. You weren't on the list, David. Once the ink dried, the new owners were going to clean house. You were going to be laid off with a standard 2-week severance package. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just favoritism. It was a calculated, premeditated execution. My father was going to use my life's work to secure millions for himself and his golden child, and then throw me to the wolves. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because I hate losing money, Carter said bluntly. I invested in Velocity because of the proprietary tech you built. I trusted your engineering, not Robert's golf swing. The Texas buyers are getting spooked by this weekend's crash. If the system isn't stable by tomorrow morning, they pull their offer, and Velocity goes bankrupt. Robert loses everything. Julian loses everything. Carter paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the room. Your father is going to call you today, David. He has to. The board is forcing him to. When he does, make him bleed. Carter hung up the phone. I sat in my quiet office, staring at the blank wall. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together. The stolen college fund. The fake promotion for Julian. The pathetic $3,200 stipend. The secret sale. My father thought I was a loyal dog who would always come back to the porch. He was wrong. I wasn't just going to walk away anymore. I was going to turn around, walk back into that building, and take everything from him. And right on cue, 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. It wasn't an unknown number this time. It was Robert. I sat in my quiet home office, the only light coming from the glow of my computer monitor. The house was completely silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I picked up my cell phone, navigated to the blocked contacts list, and unblocked my father's number. I knew he was going to call. Carter, the billionaire investor, had promised me that the board would force Robert's hand. I didn't have to wait long. Within 3 minutes, the phone vibrated violently against the heavy oak wood of my desk. The screen lit up. Robert. Not Dad. Just Robert. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. 4 times. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to feel the exact same sinking panic I felt every single time I looked at my pathetic paycheck for the last 12 years. On the 5th ring, right before it went to voicemail, I picked it up. I didn't say hello. I just pressed the phone to my ear and listened to the heavy, ragged breathing on the other end of the line. David. My father's voice sounded completely destroyed. The booming, authoritative, larger-than-life CEO tone he used to command boardrooms and intimidate warehouse managers was completely gone. He sounded like a very old, very tired, incredibly desperate man. I am here, Robert, I said. My voice was flat, devoid of any familial warmth. Using his first name felt like taking a pair of bolt cutters and snapping a heavy iron chain that had been wrapped around my neck since childhood. He didn't correct me. He didn't demand respect. That alone told me exactly how bad the situation was at the corporate office. My father let out a heavy, painful sigh. It was the sound of a man swallowing his own pride like broken glass. I fired him, David. I fired Julian an hour ago. Security escorted him out of the building. He is gone. Emma from operations is gone too. I am looking at a burning building, and I am holding an empty bucket. I don't care about the office politics anymore. I don't care about the retention bonuses or who said what. I care about my trucks moving. I care about saving this company. Name your price. Whatever it takes to get you back in here tonight. I looked at the framed photo of Sarah and my kids on my desk. I thought about the decades of subtle manipulation. I thought about the thousands of hours of unpaid overtime. I thought about my stolen college fund, the money my parents drained to buy Julian a useless MBA just so he could pretend to be my boss. And I thought about Carter, the ruthless investor, waiting in the shadows to pull the plug on my father's secret retirement buyout. I don't want to be an employee anymore, I stated clearly, my words cutting through the air like a knife. I don't want a salary. I don't want a fancy new title. I don't want a corner office. And I certainly don't want to be part of your precious family legacy. Everyone has a price, David, my father insisted, a tiny, desperate hint of his old arrogance slipping back into his tone. Every man has a number. Just tell me what yours is. We can draft a new employment contract tomorrow morning. You aren't listening, Robert, I said, my tone dropping an octave. I will not be on your payroll. If I do this, I come in as an external consultant. Independent contractor status. I report to absolutely no one. I have zero operational dependency on your internal management team. You do not speak to me. You do not direct me. I work entirely alone. And my consulting rate is $400 an hour. Absolute silence hung on the line. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head as he did the math. $400 an hour? My father finally choked out, his voice pitching upward in shock. That is highway robbery. That is elite, Manhattan executive consultant money. You are a systems architect. You wanted an elite, executive solution to a $12 million problem. I fired back without missing a beat. But that is not all. I require a minimum 100-hour retainer, paid entirely upfront, by certified cashier's check, before I even look at a computer screen. $40,000? Robert shouted, his anger finally breaking through the thick layer of desperation. I heard something slam against a desk on his end. You want $40,000 up front for a few hours of work? Are you completely insane? I am your father. You are extorting your own family. I could hire an entire team of top-tier developers for that kind of money. Then call them, I said coldly, feeling no emotion whatsoever. Call a team of developers who have never seen this proprietary legacy code. Let them spend 3 solid weeks trying to understand the database architecture while your retail clients tear up your contracts and Carter withdraws his 40% equity stake. Go ahead, Robert. Hang up the phone and call them right now. I will go back to bed. I pulled the phone away from my ear, hovering my thumb over the red end call button. Wait, he yelled, his voice cracking loudly. Wait, don't hang up. Fine. God help me, fine. 40,000. I will have the emergency accounting department cut the certified check immediately. How fast can you get here? I will be there in exactly 30 minutes, I said, standing up from my chair. Have that check sitting on the front lobby desk. If it is not there, or if it is a standard company check that can bounce, I turn around and drive home. And Robert. What? He snapped, defeated. Tell building security to permanently deactivate Julian's badge. If I see his face anywhere in that building, the deal is completely off and you can explain it to the board of directors. I ended the call. I didn't wait for his confirmation. I had the absolute upper hand. I walked out to the kitchen, grabbing my car keys from the counter. Sarah was awake. She was leaning against the doorway, her arms crossed over her robe, holding a glass of water. She looked at me, raising an eyebrow in silent question. I am going back, I told her, zipping up my jacket. But I am not going back as a loyal son, and I am not going back as a cheap employee. I am going back as a mercenary. Sarah smiled a small, fierce, incredibly proud smile. Take everything they have, she said softly. Make them pay for every single minute. The drive back to the Velocity Logistics corporate campus felt entirely different from the drive home just 24 hours earlier. The roads were dead empty. A freezing, miserable November rain had started to fall, slicking the asphalt and reflecting the orange glow of the streetlights. I wasn't running away anymore. I was walking directly back into the lion's den, but this time, I was the one holding the loaded gun. I pulled into the massive corporate parking lot. The first thing I noticed was that Julian's shiny, aggressively loud Porsche 911 was gone from the fire lane. The lot was mostly empty, save for a few dozen scattered cars belonging to the absolute core management team and the graveyard shift IT workers who were trapped inside this living nightmare. I parked my 10-year-old truck in the designated CEO parking spot right near the front doors. I turned off the engine, stepped out into the freezing rain, and walked toward the sliding glass doors of the main lobby. The overnight security guard, a heavy-set guy named Marcus who usually spent his shifts watching sports on his phone, was standing rigidly at attention behind the granite counter. He looked at me with wide, completely terrified eyes. Word had clearly spread through the building about who had walked out and who was being begged to return. Marcus didn't say a word. He just swallowed hard and slid a thick, white, sealed corporate envelope across the smooth granite. I picked it up and ripped it open. Inside was a certified cashier's check, officially drafted by the company's emergency financial reserve. It was made out to David for the exact sum of $40,000. I stared at the numbers for a few seconds. It was more money than my father had paid me in an entire year when I first started building his empire. I folded the heavy paper carefully, slid it into the front pocket of my jeans, and tapped my old, frayed security badge against the biometric scanner. The light turned green with a soft beep. The atmosphere inside the building was physically suffocating. It felt like walking into a massive tomb. The air conditioning was struggling to keep up with the body heat of panicking employees. It smelled like stale pepperoni pizza, burnt coffee, and raw, unfiltered fear. I walked past the glass-walled conference rooms. The blinds were mostly drawn, but I could see senior project managers with their heads resting on the tables in utter defeat. I saw junior executives pacing back and forth in the hallways, yelling frantically into their cell phones, desperately trying to pacify screaming clients. The company was bleeding out on the floor, and none of them knew how to apply a tourniquet. As I approached the main IT corridor, a young project manager I barely recognized stepped into my path. He looked frantic, his tie loosened and his hair a mess. "Hey, you!" he barked, pointing a finger at me. "Are you the tech guy? Where have you been? We need someone in the server room right now. The whole routing table is corrupted." I stopped walking. I looked down at his pointing finger, and then up at his exhausted face. "Move out of my way," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion, "before I decide to turn around and let you explain to Robert why the company just went bankrupt." The young manager blinked, realizing he had just yelled at the only life raft in the middle of a hurricane. He immediately stepped back, pressing himself against the wall, his face turning pale. I pushed through the heavy, fireproof double doors of the main server room. The noise hit me like a physical wall. The cooling fans were still screaming, fighting a losing battle against the heat generated by the panicked, looping system processes. The main dashboard on the far wall was a terrifying, solid block of flashing crimson red. Standing in the center of the room was Nathan. Nathan was a 24-year-old junior systems administrator. He was a good kid, smart but incredibly inexperienced. He looked like he was about to start crying. He was frantically typing on a terminal, trying to decipher the cascading error logs. When he heard the doors close, he spun around. When he saw me, his shoulders instantly dropped, and he let out a breath that sounded like a sob. "David," Nathan whispered. "Oh my God, David." I tried. I really tried. But Julian forced a hard restart during the primary write cycle. He locked the database, and then he tried to override the lock with a brute force script. It corrupted the master index. "I know, Nathan," I said gently, walking over to him. "It's not your fault. You did everything you could." "They're gonna fire me," he said, rubbing his eyes. "No, they aren't," I replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Because I am in charge now. Log off the terminal. Go to the break room, get a terrible cup of coffee, and try to get some sleep on the couch. I have this." Nathan didn't argue. He logged off, grabbed his jacket, and practically ran out of the room, eager to escape the war zone. I walked over to Julian's former desk. It was completely cleared out. The framed MBA degree, the expensive fountain pens, the leather desk pad, all of it was gone. The only thing left was the printed emergency protocol manual I had written and given to him months ago. It was sitting at the bottom of the plastic trash can, covered in coffee stains. He hadn't even bothered to open it. I sat down at my old, familiar terminal. I plugged in my heavy noise-canceling headset to block out the roar of the fans. I cracked my knuckles, took a deep breath, and entered a state of pure, absolute, surgical focus. The fix was not magic. It was not a miracle. It was exactly what I had suspected from the moment Julian panicked. The system had hit the Black Friday volume threshold. Instead of executing the specific manual load balancing commands I had documented, Julian had completely lost his nerve. He had tried to force a hard system reboot during a massive active read-write cycle. He had essentially slammed the emergency brakes on a heavily loaded freight train traveling at 100 miles an hour. The database had done exactly what I programmed it to do in that scenario. It initiated a catastrophic lockdown to protect the core client data from being overwritten. Any competent system administrator with a few years of hands-on experience could have spotted the lockout protocol within 10 minutes. But Robert had fired the competent administrators to hire cheap, buzzword-spouting innovators who only knew how to make pretty PowerPoint presentations. I began typing. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I bypassed the locked primary sectors. I navigated deep into the secondary backup server, A fail-safe that Julian didn't even know existed because he never bothered to read the architecture maps. I manually isolated the corrupted index files and began the painstaking process of rebuilding the regional routing tables line by line. I didn't take a break. I didn't drink water. I didn't check my phone. I was taking custody of my own code, ripping it out of the hands of the ignorant people who had abused it. Took me exactly 6 hours and 12 minutes. At 1:45 a.m., I ran the final comprehensive diagnostic script. I leaned back in my chair and watched the massive main dashboard on the wall. The blinding red indicators flickered. They turned a cautionary yellow. And then, one by one, they shifted into a solid, soothing, stable green. The cooling fans began to spool down, their deafening screams dropping to a manageable, dull hum as the processing load normalized. On the secondary monitoring screen, the live package tracking numbers started flowing again in a continuous, beautiful stream. The automated sorting hubs down in Atlanta reconnected to the mainframe. The frozen trucks at the New Jersey gates were instantly cleared for dispatch. The bleeding had stopped. The beast was tamed. The system was completely stable. I opened a blank document, typed up a single-page, formal invoice for my consulting services, and hit print. I marked it paid in full. I grabbed my canvas backpack, slung it over my shoulder, and walked out of the server room. The air in the hallway already felt lighter. Word was spreading that the dashboard had turned green. I bypassed the cheering project managers and headed straight down the plush, carpeted executive hallway toward my father's corner office. The heavy oak door was wide open. Robert was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk. He looked 15 years older than he had on Friday afternoon. His expensive silk tie was completely undone, hanging loosely around his neck. His tailored shirt was deeply wrinkled. A half-empty crystal glass of scotch sat precariously near his keyboard. He was staring blankly at a towering pile of legal liability documents. I walked right in, my boots heavy on the hardwood floor, and dropped the printed invoice dead in the center of his desk. He jumped slightly, startled by the noise, and looked up at me with deeply bloodshot eyes. "You're done?" he asked, his voice rough and scratchy from hours of yelling on conference calls. "The system is stable," I said, keeping my posture perfectly straight, looking down at him. "The backlog of data is processing without any packet loss. The hubs are moving." I also took the liberty of setting up an automated cron job to handle the dynamic load balancing during peak hours. You will not need manual overrides anymore. Even a 29-year-old with a fake executive title should be able to keep it running now without setting the building on fire. Robert looked down at the paper invoice. He let out a long, exhausted breath, reached up, and rubbed his temples aggressively. "David, listen to me," he said, trying to summon the ghost of his old paternal authority. He pushed his chair back, stood up slowly, and walked around the front of the desk to face me. "I know things got incredibly heated tonight. I know mistakes were made on all sides. Firing your brother was hard, David. It broke your mother's heart. But it was the right call for the business. You proved your worth tonight. You saved this company from total annihilation." I just stared at him. My expression was entirely blank, a mask of cold stone. I let him talk. I wanted to hear exactly how he planned to spin this. "We are completely restructuring the executive leadership team effective immediately," Robert continued, taking a step closer, adopting his best persuasive salesman tone. "I want to offer you the Chief Technology Officer position, full executive benefits, a corner office on this floor, a base salary of $200,000 a year, plus performance bonuses. We need someone who actually knows what they are doing to lead us into the future. This is your legacy, David. This is what you have been working for." He reached back to his desk and picked up a freshly printed employment contract, holding it out to me like a peace offering. I looked at the piece of paper. I looked at the man who had worked me to the absolute bone, who had stolen my college fund to pamper his favorite child, who had stood by while my mother called me selfish for wanting to be paid fairly. I laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It wasn't a sarcastic chuckle. It was a genuine, deep belly laugh that echoed loudly in the large, quiet office. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of the man was almost impressive. He still thought money and a title could erase a decade of abuse. "Mr. CEO," I said, the amusement fading quickly from my face, replaced by a hard, unyielding glare. "You had someone who knew exactly what they were doing for a fraction of that cost. You had an architect who built your entire digital infrastructure from scratch. You had blind, stupid loyalty, and you chose to insult that loyalty. You chose to humiliate me to save a few pennies on the budget, while simultaneously throwing literal gold at a kid who only knew corporate buzzwords." Robert frowned deeply, pulling the contract back slightly. "I am trying to fix it, David. I am offering you exactly what you have always wanted. I am giving you the keys to the kingdom. You don't have a talent problem, Robert," I said, my voice cold and sharp as a razor. "You have a culture problem. A rotting, deeply toxic corporate culture built entirely on exploitation and nepotism. You valued empty talk 10 times more than you valued actual, grueling work. You gave Julian a $66,000 bonus for doing nothing, and you gave me a $3,000 stipend for keeping you in business. And I am far too expensive to fix your culture." Robert's face flushed a violent, angry red. The gentle, paternal mask shattered completely, revealing the selfish, dictatorial businessman underneath. "You arrogant, ungrateful brat," he spat, pointing a shaking finger directly at my chest. "You come in here, extort your own father for $40,000, and then throw a CTO offer right back in my face? After everything I did for you? After everything this family provided? This company is your inheritance. Everything I built, every drop of sweat, was for the family. You are turning your back on your own blood over a stupid bonus check. You are destroying your own future." I felt a cold, hard smile pull at the corners of my mouth. This was it. This was the exact moment Carter, the billionaire investor, had handed me on a silver platter. It was time to pull the pin on the grenade. "Inheritance?" I asked softly, tilting my head. "Is that what we are calling the Texas buyout deal, Robert?" Robert froze. He froze completely, as if someone had injected ice water directly into his veins. His extended finger dropped slowly to his side. The angry red color drained out of his face so fast he looked like a corpse. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes darted wildly around the room. "Yeah, Robert. I know," I said, taking a deliberate step closer to him, forcing him to back up until his thighs bumped into his own mahogany desk. "I know all about the secret negotiations. I know about your brilliant plan to artificially inflate the company's valuation using the automated systems I built, just so you could secure a better sale price. I know about the massive golden parachutes you structured specifically for yourself and Julian. And I know that I wasn't on that list. I know that I was going to be handed a cardboard box and a standard 2-week severance package once the ink dried and the new owners cleaned house." "Who?" Robert stammered, his voice barely a terrified whisper. He looked physically ill. "Who told you that? That information was strictly confidential. Only the board knew." "Carter told me," I said, dropping the final, devastating bomb. "Carter called me personally yesterday afternoon. He knows all about the Texas buyers. And more importantly, he knows that you lied to him about the stability of the tech infrastructure. He knows your golden boy Julian completely destroyed the network. In fact, Carter told me he is initiating the legal process to pull his entire 40% equity stake by the end of the week." Robert grabbed the heavy edge of his desk with both hands just to keep from falling over. His legs literally gave out. He slumped heavily back into his expensive leather chair. He looked incredibly small. He looked defeated. He looked completely and utterly destroyed. "You built this company on my back, Robert," I said, leaning over his desk, planting my hands on the wood to look him right in his terrified eyes. "You stole the college fund you promised me just to buy Julian a fake degree so he could pretend to be my boss. You treated me like a peasant in your own kingdom. And you were going to sell me out to a Texas conglomerate for a fat retirement check." I tapped my knuckles twice on the solid wood of his desk. The sound cracked like a gunshot in the silent room. "There is no inheritance. There is no family legacy. There is just you, sitting in a burning building, waiting for the investors to take whatever money you have left. I fixed your servers tonight so you wouldn't face criminal negligence and breach of contract charges from your clients. That is the absolute last thing I will ever do for you. Robert didn't speak. He couldn't. He just stared blankly at the floor, his breathing shallow and rapid. He had lost his company, his most valuable employee, his son, and his pride, all in the span of 48 hours. I turned around, grabbed my backpack, and walked toward the door. David, he whispered weakly to my back. I didn't stop. I walked out of his office, down the brightly lit hallway, and left him entirely alone in the wreckage of his own making. This is the moment that changes everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you so much for your patience and for staying with me until now. You've been amazing. Please give this video a like and comment one below to let me know you've made it this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences truly mean something to someone. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep sharing the rest of this journey. I walked into the massive glass and steel main lobby just as the sun was beginning to rise. The sky outside the corporate doors was turning a beautiful, crisp shade of autumn purple and brilliant orange. I had the $40,000 certified check sitting safely in my pocket. My muscles ached. My eyes burned from staring at monitors, but my soul felt incredibly light. I had my freedom. As I approached the main exit, the automatic sliding doors in my sights, I saw two figures sitting on the expensive leather couches in the visitor waiting area. It was my mother, Martha, and my brother, Julian. Julian looked absolutely miserable. He was still wearing the same custom Italian suit from Friday night, but it was ruined. The jacket was wrinkled, his tie was gone, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He was staring blankly at his phone, his face pale and drawn. My mother was sitting right next to him, her hand resting on his arm in a protective, comforting gesture. When they heard the heavy thud of my boots on the marble floor, they both looked up. My mother immediately stood up. She quickly arranged her face into a perfectly practiced mask of deep sorrow and tragedy. She was ready to play the ultimate victim, a role she had perfected over decades. David, she called out, stepping into my path, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. David, honey, please stop. We have been waiting out here for hours. Julian wants to apologize to you. He is so sorry for everything. Your father was so harsh with him tonight. He lost his job, David. He lost his car allowance. His life is ruined. We need to sit down as a family and fix this. We can go to a lawyer. We can sort out a new, better contract for you so everyone can be happy. Julian stood up slowly from the couch. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. He looked at my boots. Dave, man, I messed up, Julian mumbled, shifting his weight uncomfortably. The pressure of the executive role was too much. You know, I am not a core code guy. I'm an ideas guy. Please talk to Dad for me. Tell him the system was just glitchy. Tell him I can come back as a senior consultant or something. We are brothers, man. They were unbelievable. It was genuinely breathtaking to witness. Even now, after the entire system had crashed, after the extortion, after the truth about the Texas buyout was laid bare, they still thought they could manipulate me. They still thought family ties were an endless, bottomless bank account that they could withdraw forgiveness from whenever they needed it. It felt like watching two strangers going through a nasty divorce, fighting desperately over the custody of a life I had already completely abandoned. I didn't slow my pace. I didn't stop to argue. I didn't yell and I didn't curse at them. I looked right through them. I treated them exactly the way they had treated me for 12 long years. Like they were completely invisible. Like they didn't matter. David, don't you walk away from your mother. She shrieked as I bypassed her completely. I pushed the heavy glass doors open. The cold, fresh morning air hit my face, carrying the scent of rain and wet asphalt. I walked out to my old, reliable truck. I climbed into the cab, started the engine, and drove out of the Velocity Logistics campus for the very last time. I didn't check the rearview mirror. I just watched the sunrise over the highway. The next 2 months were, without a doubt, the best months of my entire adult life. I didn't immediately apply for another corporate tech job. I didn't want to look at another server rack, read another line of code, or deal with another panic manager for a very long time. I took the $40,000 check I had forced out of my father, deposited it, put half of it directly into my kids' college savings accounts, and used the other half to completely unplug from the corporate world. The very first thing I did was buy a truckload of premium cedar lumber. I spent the next 3 weeks in my backyard, building a massive, intricate treehouse for my 2 young kids. I spent my days covered in sawdust, hammering nails, measuring angles, and breathing in the sharp, clean smell of fresh pine. I turned off my computer. I deleted LinkedIn from my phone. I didn't read any industry news. I just existed in the physical world. I was present for dinner with Sarah every single night. I helped my kids with their math homework instead of debugging sorting algorithms. In late October, once the treehouse was finished, Sarah and I left the kids with her parents and took a 2-week trip to Italy. It was the honeymoon we never truly got to have. We walked through ancient, crumbling ruins in Rome. We drank incredible, heavy red wine on small, sun-drenched patios overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. We ate handmade pasta until we physically couldn't move. And for 14 straight days we made a pact. We did not say the words server, latency, retention bonus, or family. We completely purged the corporate poison from our systems. The deep emotional wounds from my family's betrayal slowly turned into scars, and eventually, the scars stopped aching. When we got back home to the States in November, my mind was sharp again. The heavy fog of burnout was completely gone. I realized something important. I still loved the work. I loved solving complex digital puzzles. I just absolutely hated the people I had been working for. I filed the necessary legal paperwork to start my own independent tech consultancy firm. I built a clean, simple website detailing my expertise in logistics infrastructure. I finally updated my LinkedIn profile to reflect my new business owner status. I didn't have to spend a single dollar on marketing or advertising. My reputation in the industry had already done all the heavy lifting for me. The story of the Velocity Logistics Black Friday meltdown, and the mysterious, highly paid architect who walked away and then charged a fortune to put the fire out, had become a minor legend among the East Coast tech circles. People knew I was the guy who survived a crashing empire. I got my first major client exactly 3 days after I officially launched the business. My very first client was the largest direct competitor to Velocity Logistics. Their chief technology officer called me personally on my cell phone. They had heard the rumors. They wanted a complete, top-to-bottom, ruthless audit of their own shipping infrastructure. They wanted to make absolutely sure they didn't have the same hidden vulnerabilities and legacy code flaws that caused my father's Black Friday disaster. I sent them my standard consulting contract. I set my rate at $250 an hour. It was fair, premium market value for a senior systems architect working as an independent contractor. They didn't try to negotiate. They didn't offer me a stipend. They signed the contract and paid the retainer without blinking an eye. As I integrated into the new industry circles, building my business and securing more clients, the news about my former family business slowly trickled down to me. The karma was swift, absolute, and completely merciless. Carter, the billionaire investor, had kept his word. The Monday after I fixed the servers, he officially initiated the legal process to withdraw his entire 40% equity stake. The sudden financial instability, combined with the loss of their primary tech architect, terrified the Texas buyers. They realized the company's valuation was built on a house of cards. They immediately pulled their buyout offer off the table and walked away. Without the massive cash injection from the sale, and facing severe financial penalties from the delayed Black Friday shipments, Velocity Logistics entered a rapid death spiral. Robert desperately tried to hire a new team of expensive developers to replace me, but nobody wanted to touch the undocumented, highly complex legacy code without a massive payout. The system I had carefully patched together began to degrade rapidly without my constant, daily maintenance. Exactly 6 months after I walked out of that server room, Velocity Logistics officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They were acquired for pennies on the dollar by a ruthless private equity firm known for stripping distressed companies for parts. The new owners came in and immediately fired my father. They dissolved the entire board of directors. They sold off the fleets of trucks, closed the Atlanta hub, and liquidated all the physical assets. The legacy code I spent 12 years building finally died, replaced by a cheap, off-the-shelf software solution that was incredibly slow, full of bugs, and universally hated by everyone who had to use it. Robert lost his CEO title, his massive salary, and his golden parachute. He was forced to sell his luxury home and his cars to cover the personal debts he had leveraged against the company. Julian, completely unemployable in the high-tech sector with his fake MBA and terrible industry reputation, had to move back in with our parents. He currently works as a mid-level shift manager at a retail electronics store. The golden child was finally permanently grounded. They lost their fake empire, and I gained my entire life. I sometimes sit in my home office late at night, listening to the quiet hum of my computer, and think about that Black Friday. I remember the blinding red lights flashing on the server room dashboard. I remember the high-pitched screaming of the cooling fans. I remember the sheer, suffocating panic in Julian's eyes when he finally realized the real world didn't run on empty corporate buzzwords. And I remember the absolute, crushing weight of being the only adult in the room, surrounded by people who demanded everything from me and offered absolutely nothing in return. Corporate managers and arrogant CEOs love to tell you that everyone is replaceable. They say it in meetings to keep you scared. They say it during performance reviews to keep your salary low. And technically, if you look at a spreadsheet, they are right. Everyone is eventually replaceable. But what they never tell you, what they are terrified for you to figure out, is that the true cost of replacement is not just the salary of the new guy they hire to take your desk. The true cost is the massive fire that burns down the entire house while the new guy is standing in the front yard, desperately trying to figure out how to turn on the water hose. I kept my old Velocity Logistics security badge. It sits in the top drawer of my desk, right next to a framed photocopy of the $40,000 cashier's check my father was forced to write me that night. I pull that frayed badge out and look at it every time I have to sit down and negotiate a new contract with a client. It grounds me. It reminds me of the most important, painful lesson I ever learned in the brutal world of business and family. Your true value is not defined by what you do for people every single day. Your value is defined by what happens when you stop doing it. Sometimes people will take your hard work for granted. They will look right past your sacrifices. They will hand the rewards you earn to someone else because of office politics, or blatant nepotism, or sheer willful ignorance. When that happens, you cannot argue with them. You cannot beg them to see your worth. Sometimes you just have to step back. You have to unplug your headset, pack your bag, and walk out the door. You have to let their world burn down around them just a little bit, just long enough to show them that you were the one holding the water the entire time. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. I know it was a long one, but I hope this resonated with you in some way, especially if you have ever felt invisible in your own life, your own family, or your own career. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, where your hard work was ignored while someone else took the credit? Tell me about it in the comments. Also, if you made it to the very end of this video, you are part of an exclusive group. I want you to comment the letter W below. That stands for winner. That is the secret code for the 1% Club, the amazing people who stay for the whole journey and truly understand the message. It helps me know exactly who my real supporters are. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and follow the channel. It costs nothing, but it means the world to me, and it ensures we can keep sharing these real, honest experiences together. Stay strong, know your worth, and I will see you in the next video.